guys, welcome back to the channel, and today's video is just a bit of a sit down, just chatting about the R7, which I don't have to hand at the moment as I am attempting to film on it today, which is very rare that I do. I'm usually using my phone in the 4K mode on the camera, just as I'm usually using the camera that I am filming with now to shoot everything with, so I can never film on that. But I thought I would come outside as it is a very lovely day. However, the lighting is a bit harsh, so we might change. But essentially, this is just a bit of a review on the R7 in regards to mainly shooting motorsport, as when I was looking to buy it I couldn't find any videos on like how it performed or kind of how it worked, so I was discovering it all for myself and ultimately took a bit of a gamble based on photos that I'd seen as opposed to videos. So I hope you enjoy this video and that it is useful to some people who are looking to buy the R7. And I apologise about the harsh lighting, as yeah, I figured would come outside. I just looked back at the first clip and ultimately, yeah, the lighting, you couldn't see this half of my face, so I have literally just moved a meter just so the light is behind me as opposed to in front of me, and I may be backward a little, but it doesn't look too bad, so we'll go with this. So the R7, it's like, it's so hard to start this. I should have probably written some stuff down about it, but doing these talking videos, I much prefer just to kind of ramble and go for it as opposed to planning beforehand. So where do I start? I first tried the R7 doing some self-portraits using the app on my iPad, and ultimately the focus on this it doesn't latch on as well as if you are like focusing it yourself on the camera, and like I'm happy with the photos that I've got from doing that, but ultimately they're not super sharp, they're slightly soft, but for the purpose of Instagram, which is generally what they are for, I am happy with it and that is fine by me. This, however, changed when I tried the double exposure feature out on it, as I was focusing it, kind of just like pressing the button on the camera to focus it on my face, and these were a lot sharper, and I don't know to the extent you can move around and it will track you, but yeah, so that mode, using it on the iPad, and I don't know if that is just my iPad or just how I've been using it. I've only used it twice doing that, but it's been a bit soft in that regards. But I think essentially that is my only like niggle with it. Moving on to kind of the motorsport side of it before I touch on portraits again, my biggest kind of concern when buying the R7 is whether or not it would work with my lens that I use for motorsport, which is the contemporary Sigma 150 to 600mm, and I love this lens. It works really well on my 5D and it is everything I'd want to do, and I've just seen, when I was looking into it, there's a lot of videos on wildlife photography and kind of general use of it, but it's not too much focused on the motorsport side of it. And one of the big problems I was seeing with the pairing of the R7 and I think the other R cameras in the Canon range is that the system that locks into the lens wasn't quite locking into the Sigma lenses, specifically the 150 to 600, as well as it should do, and it was causing the focus to jump around a bit, and this was a massive concern I had with it, and I ultimately decided that I was going to buy the R7 and just kind of hope it worked with this camera, as when I went to look at it I didn't get the chance to try it out with the actual, like I didn't get a chance to try the lens out with the actual camera, as they were still quite new in stock and they didn't have any display ones out. However, saying this, I did try it on the R6 and it did work very well, and I didn't really notice any jumping about, but they are a lot more kind of intuitive than I'm used to, so it was very quick, very fast, which was good, but I just kind of wasn't used to that. so I still had a few reservations about this problem, but now that I've used it for, what's it, about 3 months, I want to say? 3 months doing motorsport things. My biggest concern was originally going into the first track day that I shoot for my mate Joel, as I hadn't properly like tested this, and when I tested it at Mallory on like the week before, I think, it had been like the focus wasn't quite, it wasn't like blowing me away, but it turned out I had, and if you've seen the kind of first test run of this camera doing motorsport, I touch a bit more on this in that I just kind of, some bizarre reason over winter, forgot how to shoot motorsport. So that was very much needed to blow the cobwebs off. But when it came to shooting my first track day of the year for Joel, I was very, very nervous going into it, more so than normal. But this was solely because I have previously used his old Nikon D700? That might be wrong, I don't know my Nikons, I just know I used this one from him. So I've been using that one previously all throughout last season, and its autofocus was amazing and I knew I could trust it with the results and everything. But considering this was my first time using my own kit, and with the 5D I would not trust it at all to do quick autofocus. That's ultimately the reason I ended up buying the R7, was because the Canon didn't quite, not the Canon, the R5, not R5, the 5D ultimately didn't do the autofocus speed I needed, so hence the R7. But yeah, so going into this I was a bit unsure and a bit nervous about using it, but ultimately if you've ever been to Alton, you know that Knickerbrook at the bottom of Clay Hill is quite a nice spot to shoot, and anywhere where they're coming kind of at you at the camera is a relatively easy shot to get. And this was the first shot that I started off with, and as soon as I kind of checked it back and like noticed a lot of them were that a lot of them were sharp, I immediately relaxed and got on with enjoying the day, even though that day then went quite confusing with the red flags, but that is not what this is about. So that was my first proper kind of trial, like not trial, but that was like first time kind of properly putting it to the test doing motorsport, and I was really happy, really happy with how it worked, and there were no problems at all really with the Sigma 150-600 lens. It worked smooth, like seamlessly, and that was such a big relief, because when I knew that wasn't a problem, well, not a problem for me at least. I think the problem occurs when you're trying to focus on like small objects like birds, and I think it jumps around a bit just because it's quite a small focus. But with bikes and vehicles, I haven't noticed a problem with it, and that was such a big relief. So if you've got that lens and you're thinking of buying this camera, do it. I would totally recommend it, and it has changed my shooting. I am thoroughly in love with this camera. But yeah, if you've got the 150-600 Sigma lens and you're considering the R7, definitely do it. There are no real problems with the lens connectivity to the camera unless you are shooting wildlife. I haven't personally tested that, but I know there are videos on YouTube that talk about that problem with the jumping of focus, but I think it's mainly on small objects, as I've said. The next point I wanted to discuss is just how intuitive it is and how quick it is. So moving from something like the 5D Mark III that I used for the last 2 years, I want to say 2 years, 1 year, I'm not sure, but moving from the 5D Mark III, which is one of the older kind of DSLR models from Canon, it's nice to use and it's a very professional level camera, and I meant to use it to shoot my uni project on, but I completely forgot and had the R7 with me, so I shot it on that and in JPEG instead of RAW, which I'm kicking myself for, but I'm hoping the photos turn out okay, as that was a slight problem that I discovered, but we move. So yes, the intuitive and how quick it is. This, when I initially started using it, really threw me off, as I had been used to kind of more of an, it's not analog, but like a slower style, which the 5D does, where it's all kind of a bit more manual, whereas this just does it kind of all for you. And having the digital viewfinder is so handy, as to get the lighting right on the 5D, I was finding myself looking through the LCD screen more than through the actual viewfinder, as the viewfinder didn't kind of key in the settings that I'd put in, so you didn't see the altered image based on kind of what you'd put in, which was a bit of a problem and a bit of a pain, as I wasn't using the viewfinder for anything really aside from motorbikes, as it's so much easier to track and pan through looking through your viewfinder. So having a digital viewfinder on this is so handy, as I find myself looking through the viewfinder more if it's not a weird angle that I need the LCD for. And it makes it easier when kind of changing your settings in Motorsport as well, which is very handy. But once I've now gotten used to kind of how intuitive it is, and as I say, I'm loving using this camera, and I am so thrilled I opted for it, even though it is a crop frame sensor as opposed to being full frame. Another thing that I couldn't find any videos on was how EF lenses work with the converter on the R7. So when I bought the R7, I also bought the converter with it, and it was a bit of a faff, as like everywhere was sold out of this converter. And because of the rumoured problem with the Sigma 150 to 600, I decided to go for the Canon branded converter, just to eliminate any potential problems that would come with any converters that weren't specifically from Canon, as I wanted to know whether or not it was the lens. But if I stuck a kind of third-party converter on this and then that caused a problem, but then I thought it was the lens, that would just be a whole host of problems. So I went for the pricier Canon converter, but that was solely to eliminate any problems. And as far as using EF lenses on the R7 goes, there's not really a difference, if I'm being completely honest. It's like, at the moment I have no R lenses, just for reference. At the moment I can't really justify the price of them. I might go for a smaller kind of wide lens one at some point, but they're all quite pricey for what they are, and I know there are no like third parties like Tamron or Sigma that are allowed to use the R mount. That might have since changed, but as far as I'm aware, they are not allowed to make any lenses with the R mount, which is a bit of a problem. And just because obviously any branded, like any kind of brand which has a brand on, so whether it's like Doc Martens shoes or like Canon cameras or Nikon cameras, they're all a little bit pricier because you kind of pay for the brand as well as the tech. But that's a bit of a problem, so I own no R lenses, as I had everything I needed in my EF kit. So for example, at the moment I'm shooting with my EF 24-70mm on, which is one of my favourite lenses since I got it for the point of using a gimbal, and ever since I bought it, it's when like my zoom lens isn't on, this is the lens that's on my camera. However, I also quite like the 50mm on the R7, as it's quite compact. It's probably about this big when it's got the 50 on. However, the 50 is then turned into an 80mm, and we're on holiday, and I think the 50mm on it would be my favourite option, just because of how small it is and easy to carry. But doing landscapes and such, I like the wide factor of the 24-70, but that one remains to be seen. And going back to the difference with the EF lenses, there is really no difference that I have found at the moment anyway, and I've used my Sigma EF on it, my 24-70 EF on it, and my 50mm on it, and there has not been a difference really, if I'm being completely honest, which is such a relief, as obviously you can spend so much money on glass, and to kind of have to buy a whole new set because they don't work as well on the R cameras would be such a pain, but luckily they do, and that is such a relief if I'm being honest. And you still retain, to be fair, like a fair amount of, I don't really think the crop factor, in my opinion, the crop factor doesn't really seem to impact it too much, as on the Nikon I was using last year, the lens I was using with that was a 200 to 500 I think, and that just felt so close on the 200, whereas using my 150 to 600 on this, it still feels like significantly zoomed out, even though the 150 is doubled. So personally, I don't really think there's too much of a difference. Obviously the only one that I really do notice the difference on is the 50mm, as it doubles to effectively 85mm, and when I've been trying to do some portraits you do notice how close that is, especially when you've used the 50 on a full frame camera. You know how different it can be and how beautiful a proper 50 is. So that is my kind of only thing, is just that the 50 is a bit too zoomed in, but I know this. However, I don't have an 85mm portrait lens, so this is handy as it kind of does it for me. But yeah, on my kind of zoom lenses I haven't really noticed a problem with the crop factor, which is handy. And for motorsport it's even a bit of an advantage, as like a 600mm lens goes from being 600 to like 900mm, which is incredibly handy as you get so much more reach. A fair few people on YouTube, when I was looking at kind of the R7 in comparison to the R6, were saying that kind of the R7's more geared towards video than it is photography, and I'm undecided on this one. I think the video aspect in it is incredibly good, and again, having that very intuitive autofocus, especially sat here right now doing this, it's focusing on me and I didn't have to set that up. You kind of just press go and it kind of finds its focus, which is so handy, especially doing little bits and pieces in Motorsport for socials, as you don't have to spend ages trying to find the focus, and then when you're following someone trying to follow the focus and all that faff, which I found with the 5D, this just locks on and it goes, and it is a game changer. But yeah, so the video on this is incredible, the quality is amazing as it can shoot in 4K, and yeah, video is amazing on this. But in terms of photography, I think like it's a mixed one, because portraits that I've been shooting on it are very sharp. I've shot, as I say, accidentally shot my whole uni project on this and didn't shoot it in RAW, and the quality that is coming out of those JPEGs, for them being JPEGs, like, let's bear that in mind, because RAW is obviously a hell of a lot more detail and information in it than a JPEG. They are very high quality, and I'm zooming into them and they're very good. The only thing I will probably say with this is that self-portraits and doing portraits where you're not directly behind the camera and you're doing like this, you're trying to shoot yourself, they can have a tendency to be a bit soft on the focus, only because you don't have the ease of control that you would if like you was behind the camera shooting someone. So there's that to bear in mind, and also after a certain point the images do become a little bit soft as you zoom in, but looking at the image, it like, and if it's sharp, it is great quality. So yeah, it's a bit of a mixed one. I personally don't really have a problem with it for photography, and it's definitely very good for film. And essentially this has got the, so you've got this and then the R and the R10 I think, and those two are both full frames. And this one, how it was marketed, was very much for like sports photography and like wildlife photography, and with the R3's autofocus system in it, it honestly does so well for the motorsport stuff that I do, and motorsport by no means is slow, so it does an incredible job with that. All the photos I've taken so far this season I'm really happy with, and probably a little bit happier than I was with them on the 5D. So essentially, in my opinion, I think photography is just as good on this as the video, and I think they're both on par. Obviously the 5D had a bit more resolution in the images, and so will the R6, R5, the R10 and the R, just because they are full frame sensors and this is cropped. But aside from that, I think it's about par, to be honest. Just some concluding thoughts on the kind of overall build of the camera and the aesthetic of it. And first of all, I'm so thrilled to have a flip screen back, as that is so handy. And my very first DSLR, the 600D Canon, had a flip screen, but it wasn't like super high quality, so you could never tell if you're properly in focus. This, however, even though it's not like super high quality as it could be, because it is a bit of a budget camera, I love it. The quality is amazing, and like just the autofocus, like flicking every now and then between the lens and the viewfinder and the LCD screen, it still focused on me, and it still looks pretty good quality. So that is lovely, especially when you're shooting some bizarre angles, as I've started to experiment with some kind of low angles on my motorsport stuff, so having the flip screen just so I can tilt it and see it separate whilst having the camera quite low is very handy. And honestly, since getting this, I have been so excited to get it out and shoot, and just to shoot and create in general. Saying that, I haven't done any creating outside of motorsport since the season has started, but I want to change this, and having this, it just gets me so excited to do it. It's so easy to do it. It's so easy to shoot everything, so self-portraits, as it's really intuitive, it connects to the app, and like video, it just makes everything so much easier in my opinion. Plus there is something about the Canon mirrorless range and just mirrorless cameras in general that are so aesthetic and just so lovely to hold and just use in general. They are just lovely, and I love this camera basically. And it also fits my mic on it very well, and I don't use this mic nearly as much as I should do, but with how the mic hold sits on it, I can wrap the cable around, and it makes it a lot tidier, a lot more of a tidier setup to use. So I'm aware this video has just been essentially a massive ramble and a mixture of the good and the bad and my thoughts on it overall, and I hope it came across in a bit more of a put together way than it sounded to me. But yeah, so that was essentially my review of the R7 after using it for 3 months and focusing it mainly around motorsport, as that is what I initially went in to buy this for, and I couldn't find any videos talking about the usage of it or like the hands-on with it for anything other than like portrait wildlife. So I thought I'd create this just to give everybody a bit of a kind of in-depth look at it if in relation to motorsport, in case that is what you're looking at, as I know I would have found something like this incredibly helpful. So essentially it's a really good camera, great budget camera considering it's got the focus system the R3 has in it. It does motorsport incredibly well, it films incredibly well, its autofocus is amazing, and I couldn't go back to the 5D after this autofocus on motorsport. And yeah, it's like niggles, but essentially I love it. And if you were hesitating on buying this, if you've got the 150 to 600mm lens, I would say, as I've previously said, just buy it. It is amazing. There are no problems with it unless you're doing kind of wildlife. Then you've got that jumping focus, but I can't speak too much on that. I just know that in relation to motorsport, it is not really a problem at all. So definitely buy this if you're considering it, as I love it and it does everything I would love it to do for like a fraction of the price of the R3, for example, or the R5, even, as I was originally considering getting the R5. But yeah, it's a great camera, and I hope this provided some information for you as to whether or not it is the camera for you. But yes, I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you've got any comments, leave them below and I will try and respond to them. And if you've got any ideas for what you'd like to see in the future, especially around the R7, as I'm always open to ideas, just again leave them below. Give give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe, as we are now fully in the motorsport season and I will have a lot of motorsport content coming. So stay tuned and I'll see you next time.